moment, it gives me great pleasure to I want to be like this when I grow up. In my 9th decade, I want to be still so passionate about what I experienced myself and the chance to be involved in the journey of helping people in prison. And so 83 years young, can we give a massive welcome to Jonathan Aitken? Well, Jonathan, it's such a treat to have you here. It's a real privilege for us. And Jonathan actually did come here in about 2003 and did loads of events back then. So I'm not sure if it's the first time you've been back. But listen, a number of us are familiar with the story, a number of us are not. And the reason I wanted to get you and Shane in is because you had sort of one trajectory, and Shane had another trajectory in terms of backgrounds, and yet you've both had a wonderful shared experience through your prison encounters. And so we'll get to that, but just paint a picture of your background and what eventually led you to be in the cabinet with John Major.
Well, I spent 25 years of my life almost in HMP House of Commons, and which was a wonderful experience. I mean, if anyone of you get a chance to go into Parliament or political arena, it's a wonderfully good life of service and excitement, full of disappointments and dramas, but also wonderful friendships and wonderful, sometimes, results. You actually change something. Before that, I was a journalist. I was a war correspondent in Vietnam and various other places. But from about the age of sort of 12 school debating societies, I'd always actually longed somehow to be in the political and parliamentary arena. So when I got there, it was very exciting. And I had a constituency on the south coast of England. If you called it the White Cliffs of Dover, you wouldn't have been wrong. You could see Calais from across the channel. In those days, there were no small boats coming over. It was rather surprisingly a fishing town, a mining town. People have forgotten that there were plenty of miners in Kent, and they were very, very noisy at the time of the strike. But I had a marvellous life in politics and really enjoyed it to the full, despite the disappointments and eventual disasters.
First question has come in from someone, and it is, so you went to Eton. What was worse, Eton or prison?
It's not a silly question. The life of an English public school boy, and Eton perhaps in particular, was quite tough, quite rough. And prison was really none of those things. Prison was not, I find it, no great hardship. Of course, you mind enormously losing your liberty, and you mind enormously all kinds of emotional things to do with being in disgrace and so on. But in terms of the actual hardship, the food was about equal. But there's plenty of jokes around how English public school boys are always okay in prison, and whereas people who seem to be very, very tough, East End villains with wonderful string of convictions, actually they've never been away from home. So when they get into prison, they sometimes go to pieces quite badly, emotionally. So the joke is kind of on Eton in a way.
Right. So Eton, then Oxford, and debating society. I mean, was it obvious that trajectory was going to take you to be in Parliament?
You don't think it's obvious at the time because it's so competitive. But yes, I was played my part in the Oxford Union, the Oxford Conservative Association. I was a student politician. But I think more than anything else, I was influenced by family background. My father, although a Canadian, talked about tomatoes and bananas, but he was somebody called, a group, everyone's forgotten about it, called a Son of the Empire. And Sons of the Empire were young Canadians, Australians, New Zealanders, South Africans who had fought in the war, and often rather gallantly and been decorated. And both political parties said, we want some of them in the post-war Parliament. And my father was really in that rather unusual but real group. And and he had a lot of friends, a very gregarious, good man. And so I sort of grew up in an atmosphere of parliamentarians coming in for supper and so on. So it was sort of in the atmosphere. And I felt it was the most exciting game in town, and also a very worthwhile game of public service. So it was sort of in the bloodstream.
Mm-hmm. So then, Evening Standard, was it? And war correspondent in Vietnam. Any key experiences there?
Lots. But on the whole, I think the young Winston Churchill said, there's nothing more exhilarating than getting shot at and missed. And that was true. And I did see, earlier than most correspondents, which may be rather unpopular with my American colleagues, that maybe firepower was not going to be the determinating factor in this war, and that willpower, of which the North Vietnamese had many more than the conscript American army. And so it was a sad war, because all wars are sad, but you could see the Western side losing at quite an early stage, and I think I saw that a little bit ahead of others.
And then you went into the city?
Yes, sort of. I mean,
right. Did well, enjoyed it?
Not really. My heart was never in banking. There are excitements on the side, you know, if companies are being merged and things are being changed. It's a good experience, but I knew it wasn't what I really wanted to do.
So then you end up becoming an MP, and I think you became an MP when I was 1 year old, so that's 51 years ago. And so what was the trajectory then to ending up serving under John Major?
I spent what would now be regarded as an extraordinarily long time in Siberia, the back benches. And I actually didn't mind being on the back benches. I found there was plenty for a parliamentarian to do. I enjoyed the constituency side of it. I enjoyed the debating side of it. I'm telling you something which has been in 1,000 newspapers, in case you think I'm giving you an exclusive. But a lot of people said the reason I spent 18 years on the back benches is that I went out for 3 very happy years with Carol Thatcher, but did not marry her. And the young man who does not marry the Prime Minister's daughter isn't entirely popular in number 10. I'm about to say Margaret Thatcher was far too big a person really to let that count, but that was what it was said an awful lot. If it was true, it may have been true for the first 6 months, but if it was true, I didn't mind it at all. It was just life.
So let's get to the meat. I mean, I remember being a student and reading Pride and Perjury, which detailed your journey. You know, you're at the top of your game. People were touting you as a potential future Prime Minister.
Well, you could fill this theatre with the Heseltines, the Kinnocks, the Clarks, people who were tipped as being future Prime Minister. Yes, I think I was, but you don't take it too seriously, at least I didn't.
So you want to tell us the journey then. What happened to go horribly wrong?
Well, I was probably sort of doing well in the John Major cabinet, partly because I was new and young, and a lot of people had been there a long time and were tired. But I was, on the whole, thought to be doing fine and sort of tipped anyway for promotion, that kind of thing. And then I made a disastrous mistake, entirely my own fault. And the mistake really is too complicated to go into any detail. But perhaps what's more interesting is the reason for the mistake. The reason for the mistake was pride and arrogance. I thought I could avoid keeping to the rules. And I got into trouble. I breached the rules or even debatably did I or did I not. But I allowed a hotel bill to be paid by someone I hadn't told the civil service might have been paying it, but it happened to be a Saudi, but that was made much of at the time. But the actual offence was pretty minor. The big mistake, as so often from Watergate onwards, is not the mistake or the crime, it's the cover-up. And what I did, to my great regret and shame, instead of, when discovered by canny journalists that this might have happened, instead of saying, oh yes, I did, it was an error of judgment, I don't think it mattered much at all. But instead I said, no, my wife paid the bill. And there was some collateral, unknown woman had paid the hotel. It wasn't a very large hotel bill, 2 nights or 3 nights, I think, costing about £800. It wasn't so I couldn't have afforded it. But anyway, I accepted the hospitality and did not announce it. In those days, there were not rules about those things. There are much clearer rules now, partly because of me, I think. But anyway, I covered it up. And I expect some of you learned, as I did as a school child, oh, what a tangled web we weave when first we practice to deceive. And the cover-up gets a bit more complicated, and you cover it up a bit first. And in the end, I had to defend this lie. My wife paid the bill in a court case. And that was dangerous territory. It didn't think it would come out, but it did. And therefore, I could have been and was guilty of the crime of perjury. And that's what ended me up in prison.
It took about 4 years, didn't it? Because you went to prison in 1999, was it?
Yes.
Right. And tell us the funny bit about when you're signed in, you have to have a psychiatrist test.
Oh no, that was a good joke. What happens in prison? The first few hours of a prison sentence, even if you're expected, and I'd pleaded guilty, are pretty testing, all kinds of things go on. But also, lurking in the background, all the time in prison, is humour. And this was a moment of really quite rich comedy. I was in what's called the cage, which is where all the incoming prisoners are put in a pretty tricky scene with a lot of people getting very angry, furious, depressed, and fighting and things like that. And suddenly I'm tapped on the shoulder by an officer who says, Aitken, your turn to see the prison psychiatrist. Now, I knew I was having a bad day, but I didn't think it was quite needed the attentions of a psychiatrist. But yours not the reason why. And off I went to see the psychiatrist. And to get the humour of this moment, you need to remember, as people do not remember, but I do, that on this particular day, I was the most notorious man in Britain. Every single news bulletin, every single front page was devoted to the cabinet minister going to jail. And so everybody, I thought more or less, would have heard by now, it's been going on for about 3 days. My name was just so well notorious. Anyway, I get to see the prison psychiatrist, and it's the job of the prison psychiatrist, I now know, I didn't know at the time, to just check out every incoming prisoner to see whether or not they are a suicide risk. And to do this, he asked me an absolute bog standard list of questions. Name, prison number, date of birth, next of kin. Does your next of kin know you're in prison? The next question was, does anyone other than your next of kin know you're in prison? And I thought of the mass ranks of TV cameras, broadcasting live, and I gave the psychiatrist a wry smile, and I said, well, as a matter of fact, I think maybe 10 million people know I'm in prison by now. Psychiatrist, who had not been tuning into the day's news, did not return my wry smile. He scribbled very busily on his pad, and then he said, in tones of some asperity, CB 92298, do you mean to tell me you really believe that 10 million people think you're in prison? Do you? And I nodded. And then his tone became gentler and indeed more clinical. And he said to me in a soft, kindly voice, may I ask you, have you in your life ever suffered from delusions?
Brilliant. So, it is a spectacular fall from grace, and I think people, the tabloids loved it and lapped it up, and that could have been just the worst outcome going. But actually, in a much bigger, longer-term picture, it was part of the making of you, wasn't it? So, how did that happen?
Well, I wouldn't minimize the pain and disaster of the fall. I sometimes say I went through defeat, disgrace, divorce, bankruptcy, and jail. That's a pretty good royal flush of crises by anybody's standards, especially in the light of a noisy media, and of course with it come all kind of pain. But I never quite thought that life was over. I don't know why it was over in terms of a career, reputation, everything. But I sort of knew I was 56 years old. I seemed to have plenty of energy. I knew I'd do something else. I had no idea what it was. And it was really while in prison I started to get interested in helping and getting interested in other prisoners. And this all started because a fellow prisoner asked me to write a letter for him. And it was about him being made evicted. Anyway, I told him how to postpone an eviction. I'd had some experience of writing letters for constituents, how to do this. And when I finished writing the letter, he couldn't write himself, he couldn't read or write. And instead of doing all the things you might have expected him to do, put the letter in the mailbox or put it in his pocket, instead he turned himself into a sort of 19th century or 18th century town crier. And he went down the prison wings holding this letter I'd written for him aloft, saying at the top of his voice over and over again, "Hey guys, this MP geezer of ours, he's got fantastic joined-up writing." And this compliment to my graphological skills fell on the ears of a very receptive audience, because about a third of all prisoners, in any prisons, cannot, to an adequate standard, read or write. And when it became known that there was a fellow prisoner who would be willing to write letters for other prisoners, a queue used to form outside my cell every single night of people wanting letters written for them, often on the most intimate subjects imaginable. And this was partly a bit of a joke at first. I remember one old lad coming up and saying, "Hey, Jono, this letter writing business of yours, do you realize you was having a fantastic impact on the girls of Brixton? They can't believe the sudden improvement in the love letters they're getting from this way." Be that as it may, I was certainly making friends in the prison, but more interesting than that, I was really getting to understand and know my fellow prisoners quite well. Their backgrounds, what made them tick, where they'd gone wrong. And as I was a fellow prisoner myself, it was really easy to get on their wavelength. And I thought, while I was doing it, very few people have had this opportunity that I've had to understand the way these young minds go wrong, why, what their pressures are, what their troubles are. I'd really like to try and do something about it when I come out of prison. And I never thought for a second I was going to be a prison chaplain, an ordained priest. That was way beyond my dreams or nightmares. But I did think I actually want to get involved in prison charities, prison ministry or something. And so that was the start of it.
Wonderful. Well, we'll come, I think, to the prison chaplaincy stuff that you've done subsequently in the Q&A for those who want to stay behind. Just on your faith journey, if you can talk about that, because I think you'd been sort of a nominal church attender, and you'd been in a church choir and that sort of thing, or a boys' choir earlier in life. But when did it become real to you?
I think God comes to people often through other people. And the person who brought me into contact with God was a fellow prisoner, an Irish burglar, unsurprisingly called Paddy. And I wrote quite a few love letters for Paddy, a rather complicated life. After I'd been doing this for about 3 or 4 months, one evening he said to me, sort of clearing his throat into a rather formal kind of vote of thanks speech instead of our usual banter, he said, "Look, Jono, on behalf of the lads, I've been deputed to give you a present, to thank you for all the letters you've been writing for me and other people. And So here it is, you can have a choice. You can pick anything you want to choose tonight from my library. And he found out in front of me an amazing selection of hardcore porn magazines. And after a fleeting moment of temptation, I said, thanks, but no thanks, Paddy. But I obviously said it in a sort of snooty kind of way, because Paddy flared up with anger. Said, oh, sneering at me, are you? Looking down on me, are you? Judging me, are you? I said, no, Paddy, I'm not talking. I used to like those kind of magazines. Why did you say no then? And I didn't want to answer that question, but I said, well, if you really want it, I'm on a different kind of path myself. Oh, what kind of path would that be? I said, well, it's the path of sort of exploring a faith. I've sort of got a half faith, but it doesn't seem to mean all that much. And I'm stumbling along a road of searching. That's the path I'm on. And there was suddenly a silence in that cell. And Paddy said, you know, I'd really like to try that path myself. How do I get on that path? I was no kind of preacher man those days. Didn't know what to say. But I said, I think what you do, Paddy, you pray. That's how you get on. Well, how do we pray then? And Paddy and I prayed together. First night, second night, third night, fourth night. And Paddy then said, you know, this stuff's far too good to keep to just the two of us. And I thought he meant he'd bring in an Irish burglar to make our little twosome or threesome. In fact, he went round the jail recruiting. Anyone want to come and pray with me and Johnny tonight? And about 8 or 9 hairy-heeled villains turned up. And everyone looked at me as though I knew something about it, which I did not. But anyway, we formed a prayer group. And when you are praying, get yourself in company. It's a good idea. And in that most unpropitious surroundings of a prison, and there's not much else to do in the evenings, we formed this prayer group, and it got going night after night after night. And I could tell many a story about it, but that was how I started to search, led by fellow prisoners.
And Shane, that's a key part of his journey. This evening we'll be talking about the Alpha course. Did that play a key role for you?
Sorry?
The Alpha course, did that play a key role?
The Alpha course. I actually didn't do an Alpha course in prison. I had done an Alpha course before, and it had moved me some considerable way. I was the most reluctant Alpha course goer ever. If anyone in that category tonight joined the club. And I had to sort of be, having said I'd go, I had to be kind of almost picked up at the station and brought along. But first night I went there, I thought, oh, what a relief. No one's happy or clapping at me. No one's trying to convert me. Very normal people. Interesting discussion. But I don't think I'll come back next Tuesday if I got a better invitation. There was a time in my life when I wasn't getting any invitations. So next Tuesday I did go back, and it was rather good. And then the third or fourth night, the title of the talk was, How Should We Pray? And I always remember it was not given by some vicar. It was given by a very attractive young woman in a miniskirt. At the time, beginning of the evening, I was much more interested in the miniskirt than the message. But as she got going, I listened more and more. And this talk, it was a first-class talk about prayer and the importance of prayer and why we should pray. Almost everyone prays occasionally when they're in trouble. Anyway, I went home that night rather unhappily. My wife had left me, my children away. And I said, well, maybe I should give this stuff a try. What did she say? She gave a little mnemonic: acts, adoration, confession, thanksgiving, supplication. Use that as a structure. I didn't have a structure, but I got going on a journey of prayer thanks to the Alpha course, and all kinds of other things happened. But it is a wonderful, what it says it is, a wonderful introduction to the Christian faith and finding new roads, new routes, new experiences.
Wonderful. Well, listen, I've got loads of more questions, but because of time, we're going to, I think something's going to come up on the screen, is it now, in terms of if you wanted to get the complete, you get a more complete story from Jonathan, and he's written, I think, 19 books, so there's a lot to read. But what I'd like to save, those questions, and on the QR code, you can also submit a whole load of questions on that, whatever that thing that we at the start, Menti, whatever it was, where we did that quiz. But now I want us to give, from a very different background, the stories are crazily different from opposite ends of the spectrum of human life experience, certainly in terms of privilege and opportunity at the beginning. Can we give a rapturous welcome to Shane Taylor? Bless you, buddy. Oh, so wonderful to have these guys. I've got such huge admiration for these two, and very, very from just stunningly different stories. Shane, it's amazing that you're here. Thanks for driving down from Middlesbrough today with your son Isaac, and paint a picture of your background, your story. Go for it.
How do I do that? No, I just grew up in a rough estate, really. When I was growing up, I used to get bullied, picked on. And it led to me just stealing, getting in with the wrong crowd, pinching cars, burgling houses. And then it just sort of started escalating into bigger crimes, selling drugs, and then serious violence. I started running about, like stabbing people, trying to get a reputation. I thought, for some reason, watching too many Goodfella films or gangster films, I thought that I had to be feared. So I would run around the estates and stab local people up who had a name for themselves and stuff, and just went down that route of just committing crimes, being violent. It come to a point where I hated the system. I love them now, but it came to a point where I hated government, I hated the police, I hated anything to do with police, and I went down an absolutely anti-authority road and just went on a rampage and started stabbing people. It led to me going into a pub, a local hard man in a club. We got in an argument and I stabbed him straight through his chest. I was on the run for attempted murder. And then there was another, I went into Hartlepool, a totally different estate, and there was another local hard man, or white crazy man there. We got into an altercation. In the middle of the town centre, we brought it to a standstill. He pulled out a hammer. He smashed me across my head with a hammer, and I pulled out a 9-inch kitchen blade and stuck it straight through his head. Stabbed him in the top of his head there, and it came out of his eyebrow there. On the run for 2 attempted murders. While I was on the run, I was going on a rampage after all my enemy, booting doors in, trying to attack people, putting fear into people, and then got caught. Ended up in prison. Like I told you, I was anti-authority at the time, and I couldn't handle being told what to do by prison officers and stuff. So it led to a point where they were sort of mocking me, or I felt like they were. And they wouldn't let me go to the gym, and at the time I didn't have my belly, do you know what I mean? I was training hard, but at the time I loved my training, and they kept opening my door when it come to me training. So after about the 3rd time, I told the officer through the prison door, I said, I want to get you, I want to kill you. And he said, oh, whatever, I've heard it all before, winding me up. So I went out on association. I had a towel, but I had a big massive Nescafe coffee jar.
Association, what's that mean?
It's where inmates can go out and associate and play pool and have a shower or get a phone, and you're allowed out for a couple of hours before they lock you back up on the night. It's association. But on that, I went out with a towel with a big coffee jar about that big, the big uns. I had it wrapped around my towel as if I was going to the shower. I went down on association. I went up to a friend who was 2 friends and told them to go to the end of the wing where the gates are. So when everything kicks off, you can block the gates off so the officers can't get off. And then I went to another inmate and started telling them to start chucking pool balls at we call them screws, but they're obviously prison officers, but at the screws. And to my surprise, one of the lads who I knew, he started chucking the pool balls at the prison guard who I wanted, who wasn't letting me go to the gym. And he got off the wing to try and get off the wing. The 2 lads blocked off the gate, stopped them getting off. So the officer had no choice, baton out, and ran towards the inmate who was chucking the pool balls. But he did not know that the plan was for him to do that. When he did that, I smashed the bottom of the coffee jar and ran up and kept stabbing the prison officer. stabbed him a load of times, and then another prison officer come, and he got stabbed. And that led to me going into the real eventually led to the CSC, close supervision circuit. You go from seg to seg, and that was a totally different ball game altogether.
Heavy stuff. Just paint a picture of what it was like when you had to, how dangerous you were in terms of people when you were moved from cell to outside. How complex was that process?
So it started off in Frankland, top maximum security prison in Frankland, and the CSC is basically in a cell, and they've got a hatch in the bottom of the door. They put like a metal box onto that, and they open one side up, give you food or a towel, whatever they want, lock it, and then open the other side so you can get your hand there, so there's no contact. There's 23-hour bang up, and basically when your door does open, there has to be 6 to 7 prison officers with riot gear and riot shields, and I still attacked them. No, don't get me wrong, it's deserved to be in that position the way I was. I'm not saying it's wrong, if you know what I mean. I was right to be in the place where I was. I was right to be locked away like I was. And I was right to have them officers put them shields on and treat me like I was to be treated because of the way I was acting. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So I understand I was in that position because of me, not because of the system. But I was just in a mindset of, I was lost.
And you talk about being so filled with hatred of everybody, but hatred of the system and hatred of yourself.
Yep.
Hmm. So, you know, you're painting such a horrendous picture, and I don't think anyone here can relate. I mean, I think a few people here have been to prison, but it was so bad. So what was the slow turnaround?
The crazy thing is, I ended up in I'd been in about three or four maximum security prisons by this point. But they come to my door, they opened my door and said education. And in a top security, in most prisons you've got the officer, but in a top security prison you'll have a couple of officers together. It's all in case they get attacked. You'll go to your destination. When you get there, there's a load of officers there. And they've got a clipboard. If your name's not on the list, if you get sent education, and you should know this from prison, they'll send you there. If your name's not on the list, they'll send you back to your wing. But I stood there and was like, but I've been sent down here, made a little fuss. And what's interesting is he said to me, go to the chaplaincy, but I was meant to go there for education. For some reason he said, go to the chaplaincy, and I walked to the chaplaincy, and I walked into the chaplaincy room, and all I saw was a circle of lads around this TV with a grey-haired guy. Hello, you know, Nicky Gumbel. No, no, I don't mean that, you know, but that's... But I just heard this posh man talking on the telly, and I sat down and I thought, what? Oh no, after a couple of seconds of kicking in, I thought it's one of them God things. So I'm sat there thinking, because I didn't want to just get up and disturb everyone, so I'm thinking, soon as this little thing's finished, I want to get up and go. And as I'm thinking and waiting for this video to finish, one of the lads just leant in, he went, you get strawberry gatos and biscuits and that. I went, miss, will you keep my name down on the list for us, please? And to my, I'd never heard of what I was on, but no, I ended up on an alpha course. But I don't believe by chance. I wasn't meant to be there. I was meant to be in education. And why the officer, instead of sending me to the wing, back to the wing, why directing me to go to the chaplaincy, I don't know. So I'm in there, and as time's going on, I'm like, oh no, I think I picked every little excuse you could pick up to argue with them about. And I'd be like, it's rubbish. Oh, here we go, the sand, here we go, the Bible bashes up. Oh, and I'd make excuses up. And then, do you know what surprised me? They would disrespect what I said. No matter how I disrespected them, they'd just say, oh, that's great, that's your opinion. I was like, Come on, where's the argument? Because, you know, sometimes as Christians, we can get a little fire in and we can, like, end up in a little debate. And I was expecting something like that, and I didn't get it. But then I started, my form of religion is good people, bad people. And I knew I was bad. So if God is real and hell is real, what can I do? I'm already going to hell. But I started to hear the gospel for the first time in my life, what I'd never heard before. That no matter what you've done in life, as long as you truly repent in your heart and you really want forgiveness and you don't like what you've done, God can forgive you. And I'd be like, what? But I've nearly killed people. I thought if you did that, you'd go to hell. And then I started slowly to hear. My questions went from argumentative, basically, to quizzing. And in the end, that basically led to me, you know, having the chaplaincy, Eddie Baker. He said to me, come down, I feel like God wants me to ask you to come down here this afternoon. And I went. I went back to my cell, and after the afternoon, my door opened for chaplaincy. I went down and found him. We sat a chair to each other, and he said some things out the Bible, some verses. I know one of them was, no one's righteous, not one. We all fall short of the glory of God. And then he said one about Jesus Christ dying on the cross. And then he just said, pray. And I remember saying, well, what do I say? What do I do? He said, just from your heart, pray. And I found myself saying, God, I hate who I am. I hate who I've become. If you're real, please come into my life. Nothing happened until we started talking. I've said my prayers, I'm praying, I'm asking God into my life, and we stopped. And as we're talking, we got into a normal general conversation. I started to feel something in my stomach, and it was getting stronger and stronger and stronger and stronger, and it just started raising up and raise up, and then boom, I just uncontrollably sobbed and sobbed and sobbed and sobbed and cried my eyes out. I cried, and I looked up at the chaplaincy. I don't know if I've said this before, but I said this to him. I said, don't you be telling anyone I've been crying, you. And you know, at the time I didn't realise what he meant, but he said to me, don't you worry, if it's God and the Holy Spirit, I won't need to tell anyone. He said, you will. But I didn't realise what that meant at the time. I ran on the wing in a top security prison. I'm on a list. I've seen it. When you're going in, they put you on a pyramid list. I'm on that at the top for danger and stuff for the officers. And I've ran at the officers, ran towards them, pulled my Bible out, jumped in front of them. The officers all got into a fighting stance. I thought I was ready to attack them. And I held my Bible up and I was going, it's real. It's really real. Jesus Christ is real. They all just stepped up and walked away. Do you know what I mean? They just walked off. They thought they thought I'd lost the plot even more, to be honest. They thought it was crazy then, but now they were thinking like, what's up? What's going on? But then, this is a crazy thing what would happen in a top security prison. The chaplaincy come to me and he said, there's a meeting. We want to have a meeting about this incident, what's occurred. Would you come? The number one governor wants to speak to you, and there's going to be other people there. So when I finally went down, there was a table, dead long, in this room. Number one governor was at that end. There was security, imams, social services, probation, all the services within the prison system. And they've called me, and all the religions as well. And they've called me in and sat me down at the other end of the table. And the number one governor said, right, we're going to ask you a question, blah, 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 blah. And I literally sat there for about 5 to 10 minutes, preaching, trying to tell them about Jesus, saying Jesus is real, you all need to repent and all this, right? But what's funny is they all must have been sat there, because he had papers and pens, they all must have been sat there waiting to ask some questions. But after I'd done that for 10 minutes, the governor went, does anyone have any more questions? Well, I went, no, you're all right. And then it totally changed my life, transformed my life. No, I'm not saying I'm perfect and stuff. I'm not saying it hasn't been tough. But it's totally changed my life. I'm married, kids, setting up my own business soon, which I never thought with my intelligence, you know what I mean? I never thought I'd be able to do that, but God's just even working that out. He just works everything out in his right time. And I love him. I can't even, I don't know. It's not beautiful. Well done.
I'm really proud to call both these guys my brothers, and I don't know if you could see from this distance, but see the tears falling down a former really tough man's face. It's very moving, isn't it? They've both talked about Alpha. It's both been a key part of their journey. We're going to have a quick 2-minute, which just gives you a chance to have a bit of a stretch, but just check out this 2-minute plug on what Alpha could look like.
Every day we ask so many questions. What should I wear? What's the weather going to be like? How am I going to fit everything in? But then there are those bigger questions, like why am I here? Where am I heading? Is there more to life than this?
I had arrived at an answer to the most important issue that we humans ever deal with. Is there a God? And I had arrived there without ever really looking at the evidence. And I was supposed to be a scientist.
At 28, I had gotten many of the things that I thought I wanted. My girlfriend was on the cover of magazines, I had a Beamer, and I was so unhappy. It was a realization maybe that I would never find happiness where I was looking for it.
I think for so many years, I always just strived to be strong in myself. All I needed was me and my buddies and, we'd be like invincible. But the truth is, none of us are.
I found purpose, I found meaning, I found hope. God took something so broken and made it a beautiful art piece.
Alpha is a place where you can be yourself. You can say what you think and challenge everything. No question is too complex or too simple. And what your point of view is as important as anyone else's.
We are going on a journey together, an adventure to explore the questions of life, faith, and meaning.
So as we come into land, I just want to share briefly in terms of what we're talking about, Alpha and these guys' experiences. To launch into that, a quick story, and I worked for 20 years in Central Africa, in Burundi, but just north of us there's a country called Uganda. Capital is Kampala, and there's a massive market there called the Owino market. And there was a 10-year-old little boy called Jackson. It was his birthday. And his parents had really, pushed they'd really gone for it and spent a lot of money and given him 50,000 shillings, which I think is about £15, and also this lovely new fancy jacket for his birthday. And he was super excited. And he was walking through Owino Market on his birthday, and he came across this man who was a bit sketchy looking, and this man had a cage full of birds. There's some stunning birds in Uganda. And that man he had a stick from outside, and he was laughing as he tortured those birds inside the cage. And, sort of sick and twisted. And Jackson was sort of struck by that, and he watched him. And after a while, he said, "Look, so what are you doing?" And that man said, just check it out. It's so much fun. From my stick from the outside, I prod these birds, and they don't understand what's happening, and so they start pecking each other to death. And he goes on and says, it's so much fun to me. I managed to attract them with crumbs and food, and then eventually they come into my cage, and then I shut it, and then they are mine. Well, that guy was clearly a bit sick in the head, but Jackson was struck with real compassion, and he said to the man, could I buy those birds off you? And that man could see that Jackson had this real compassion. And so he gave this really ridiculously high price. And Jackson said, well, I can't afford that, but this is what I've got, 50,000 shillings. Is that enough? And the man's eyes lit up. He's excited. That was a lot of money already. He said, well, no, that's not enough. But if you give me that and your jacket, I'll be able to sell that on for a good price as well. So if you give me the jacket as well, that's a deal. And Jackson, in that moment, he counted the cost, and then he's like, all right. And he took his jacket off and gave it to the man, handed over the 50,000 shillings, took the cage and opened the cage and let all those birds fly into freedom. Now just think about that story. This evening we're talking about freedom behind bars. And my context was Hutus and Tutsis. And when I tell that story to them out there, they totally get it. Hutus and Tutsis were all humans on the same, land, and some external dark force is just prodding them and causing them to kill each other by the hundreds of thousands. How does that happen? But it's not just there, is it? I feel like there's this external force, and for all of us, Charlie Kirk recently, what happened there? People killing over different ideologies, different views of how we should see the world, and I think it could be political ideologies, it could be theological, it could be all sorts of things. Someone supports a different team, whatever, and there's a lot of anger and there's a lot of hatred going on out in the world, isn't there, right now? There's something is very, very wrong. And how do we make sense of that narrative? And the invitation this evening, if you've been brought along by a friend, is to check it out and to think, well, maybe I'm a prisoner of something. I've worked in prisons around the world as well, and I think of, the Polesmoor prison in Cape Town. And I went there, and I was with two guys who were blood brothers, but they'd been gangsters in opposing gangs. And the blood brothers, one had shot the other through the head. He had a bullet wound here, a bullet wound there, and somehow he'd survived. And now they were radically transformed and beautiful. I remember visiting a guy on death row called Parfait. This was in Burundi, my country. And Parfait spent 2 years in a cell that was made for 12 men that had 100 men in it. And they alternated for 2 years, sat like that and kneeling down. It was horrendous. When Mandela got involved in the peace process in Burundi, he having been 27 years in prison, he visited and he was so disgusted, he rang up the president and said, can you let those guys out right now? And I got to visit Parfait, who had killed dozens of people. And he was horrendously evil, but he had this raw encounter with grace that Shane is talking about, and the impossible happened. And most of us in this room, we can't relate to Shane at all in terms of the depths of sick depravity and violence and hatred. But I think that there's all sorts of different potential prisons that we live in. It could be prisons of unforgiveness. I think of my mate Edith, and I've prayed and cried at the grave of her husband and 3 of her kids who were hacked to death in the genocide. And she rushed home, and she was too late for them. And so she packed her stuff together and tried to flee with her 3 remaining kids to the relative safe to the Congo. And she came to roadblock. She is from the wrong tribe. The man said, he's going to rape her, so he stripped her to rape her. But actually, she said to him, I'm not afraid to die because I know that as soon as you kill me, I'm going to go and be with God, with Jesus. And he said, no, God is dead. And I think you can imagine thinking God was dead in that environment because, well, for example, my friend said, this is 49 members of my family were hacked to death. Well, she prayed in that moment, Edith, Lord, I don't want to die if you're dead, so show me that you're alive. And he stripped her to rape her. He found out all her money stashed in her bra, and he took the money, legged it, and the other killers legged it, so she's able to get dressed and get through to relative safety in the Congo. 3 months later, she comes back. She goes and visits that man in prison. I've been to that prison. 1,000 men is what it's made for. 7,000 men in there. Unless loved ones bring you food, you rot. And she got permission from the gouverneur to see the head of that prison. Now, what would you say to that man? What does he deserve? So he spat out, punched in the face. And she said to him, look at me. You told me God's dead. I'm here to take you alive, that he loves you, he cares for you, he forgives you, and he's told me to do the same. So I love you. I care for you. I'm gonna bring you food. And I forgive you. And I come across a whole bunch of people who are enslaved, you're prisoners to unforgiveness. Little guy down the road from me, I've got a picture of him in my arms. He's the size of a 3-year-old, although he's 8 years old. And that's because of the trauma of when he's 3 years old, seeing his mum and dad hacked to death in front of him. And he stopped growing, age 3. And then 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, his friends, he's still down there. And then at age 8, he hears some very challenging words. Jesus says, love your enemies. Bless those who persecute you. If you want to be forgiven, you must forgive. If you won't forgive, you won't be forgiven. And so he forgave. Do you know what happened when he forgave those sick guys? He literally started growing again. And so this, to me, is very, very real. And it's worth checking out because this evening, most of us, we haven't been in a literal prison. But I come back and I from Africa, and I'll be out there in a couple of weeks' time again. And I see so many people who are totally prisoners. You can be prisoners of fear. I think we're a culture that lives enslaved to fear, and we're bombarded relentlessly by fear, and we don't need to be afraid. And it could be a prisoner to meaninglessness if you haven't found out what you're here for. And again, Alpha is just a chance to explore the meaning of life. It could be a prisoner of hate, as Shane talked about, and anger. So many people are angry and full of hate. It could be a prisoner of pride. I think a lot of us were just very proud, and a key message in the Bible is that God opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble. And why I love working in prisons is that, you don't have to tell prisoners that they screwed up, because they know they've screwed up. But actually the biblical message is that we've all screwed up in different ways. And a key part of the Christian message is that you can't do it on your own. You need a savior. And so the invitation this evening, there's just a picture that's going to come up on there's 2 invitations. One is, as this picture comes up, that's a very simple picture, but I love it. It's done by a friend of mine, and that's a picture of Jesus knocking at the door of your heart. Simple, isn't it? And the handle's on the inside. And he's not bashing his way in, but he's saying that's the offer. You could open the door of your heart and let him in. And that door thing overlaps back with Jackson, doesn't it? Because why did I tell that story about Jackson? Because Jackson is like an analogy or a picture of what Jesus did. Jesus divested himself. He came down. He paid an incredible price to open the cage so that we could be free. And loads of you are not free yet in that sense. And there's nothing like being free from shame and guilt and fear and societal expectations, the parental approval, whatever other things might constrain us. And that is the offer this evening. Here I am, that's what the verse says in the Bible. I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice, opens the door, I will come in and eat with him or her, or he or she with me. That's the invitation. Now, that might be a step too far for most of us right now, but it might not. And I think I'd love it if you're just checking things out, is to sign up for an Alpha course. We've got 4 Alpha courses and 1 Christianity Explored launching out of this. So details are going to come up on the screen now, hopefully, in terms of what that might look like. So look, St. Bart's are doing Christianity Explored. That's in Oldfield Park, and that starts 7:45 this coming Tuesday. So if you want to get your phone now, all these will be on the last QR code, so don't worry in case not. And then this one is an online one for those who don't think they can get to one in the flesh. The advantage in the flesh is obviously that you share a meal together, and no question is out of bounds, so you can go for that. That's an online one, which Philippe, who introduced the evening with Alex running. Then you've got St. Matt's in Widcombe. All right. That's this Wednesday. It's going to be raucous. Okay. Then you've got St. Andrew's. So this is Holy Trinity in Combe Down, St. Andrew's, Fox Hill. So that's going to be there starting a week Monday. I think it's next Monday. And then this one, Cornerstone. Any Cornerstoners here? Hey, not quite as raucous, but it's going to be as good. And then in January, so that's St. Swithin's going to be launching one. So you've got all sorts of options there. And so listen, I would like to just close this part, and then we're going to have a Q&A in a second. And close with a prayer. And some of you just might be ready for that, opening the door of your heart. So let's just pray. And you can pray this with real sort of honesty and openness. God Almighty, if there's freedom to be had, I want it. If there's forgiveness to be had, I want it. If there's release from shame or guilt or fear, I want it. If there's a Savior out there, I want him. If there's peace to be had, I want it. And so if this is for you, just do it. Lord, I choose to open the door of my heart right now. Thank you that you're not barging your way in, that it's my choice. The handle's on the inside. But I choose life. I say I'm sorry for the mess I've made of it, whether I've covered up my mess quite well or not. But I choose to invite you in right now. Amen. Amen. That's a simple prayer. If you prayed that prayer, I'd love to chat with you. There's a whole bunch of people that you could talk to. But the best next step would just be to sign up for Alpha. And then you can have all your questions and discussions in a great team environment. So listen, how are we going to do this? These guys are going to go out. If you want to meet and greet or grab a photo and a handshake, that sort of stuff, we'll be down there. If you want to buy the inspired book, that'll be out there as well. And then we'll reconvene, those that want to. Yeah, we've done well on time. We'll reconvene in 10 minutes for those for the Q&A, by which stage we'll have got the questions that you've sent in. You can still send in questions right now. But can we give, they've both come a long way. Can we give a spectacular round of applause to Jonathan and Shane? Brilliant, thank you. Okay. So do you want to head down those stairs? Brilliant. Wonderful. Brilliant. So as they head on out, let's just give them a quick chance to get ahead of the game. Yeah, don't you agree? I'm 83 years old. I want to be like that when I grow up. Isn't it just amazing? And what I love about Shane's story is that I can think of someone where on Fox Hill, I think those of us from Fox Hill, we can think of that same precious young lady. You know, there's some people that look really hopeless, don't they? But there's always hope for anyone. There's always hope for anyone. I remember cycling across America, doing 105 miles a day, and everything going wrong with my body. And we entered the hamlet. I had my head down. We entered the hamlet that had a sign, and it was called Hope. So we entered the hamlet of Hope, and then a mile later we exited it, and it said, Beyond Hope. But the Christian message is that there's always hope. Anyway, thank you so much for coming. If you want to come back 10 minutes, great. But otherwise, God bless you. So, Jonathan, Jack asks, how did prison affect your relationships with family and friends? And what was the hardest part about coming back into society?
So what's the second part of the question?
And what was the hardest part about coming back into society?
On the last question, I always tell people coming out of prison is much harder than going into prison. And that's because going into prison can be quite stressful and shocking, but coming out, you are very wary about how people are going to think of you, how your relationships are going to reconnect, if they're going to reconnect at all. And that really extends into the family. I was very well blessed. My wife sadly left me, although I'm on good terms with her now as a divorced wife, and been remarried since. But with my children, they were good visitors to me in prison. We never lost the links and the bonds. So that was a great strength. And I thought I'm afraid, turn their lives upside down, because quite in addition to all the publicity and the noise, we were financially very badly hit. I went bankrupt from astonishing legal bills, and so we had to lose our house and all kinds of things. So it was a very difficult time for the family. And there is an old saying that every prison sentence is not just a sentence on the prisoner, but on the prisoner's family. And that is painfully true in various ways. But I was actually quite well blessed. Have I answered the question?
Yeah, it's good. Thank you very much. Shane, let's try this one. How did you deal with the shift of your identity being defined by your shame to your identity being in Jesus?
I don't get the question. How to answer
So
it.
how did your life change from living under shame to being set free in Jesus?
Oh, yeah, if you say it in that way. I'm sorry.
No, it's good.
Unexplainable. I can't even explain it. All I know, I didn't even really care about anything. All I was bothered about when I got out of prison was I had to go and run and tell my mum, who had already thought I'd lost it because of telling her over the phone, and anyone who I would come across, all they were getting is Jesus is real, Jesus loves you, and they all thought I'd absolutely lost it. And what it was is, when you first become a Christian, you're so excited. What I was so excited that I couldn't help but go and run and telling everyone. The only problem is I hadn't taught myself how to be. So instead of, if someone showed me a little bit of an interest, instead of just standing there and giving them a little message, I'd be there for 3 hours trying to tell them, and they'd be wanting to leave by then, and I've totally put them off. So I had to learn to just stay chilled out, just tell them what they ask for, and then just walk off and hope that God does the rest. But when I first got out, trust me, I was a God Bible basher. I was. And my mum, it come to a point with my mum where she actually, my mum, I was in the house to start preaching it, and she turned round, she didn't say it as nice as I'm telling you it now. She went, if you go on about that Jesus, blah, blah, blah again, get out my house and don't come back in here. So a couple of days after, walked back in and started again. I just couldn't stop. And all my life was about then is just making things right. I even went to my the people who had attacked, and even the people who had stabbed. I tried to get people to get in contact with them. And I even met up with this man approached me in a club, and he said, look, is it real? I said, oh, it's real, and can you do me a favour? Can you tell him it's real? And about 5 minutes after, he walked in the club, and he sat down in front of me, and he said, do you, no, I said, look, I'm sorry for what I did. I said, and I hope you can forgive me. And he just looked at me for a bit, and then he just leant over and he says, it takes a man to do what you've just done. He shook my hand and walked off. And the better one's the prison officer. So what I didn't sort of tell you is, I ended up going in prisons, in the same prison where I stabbed the prison guards up to do Alpha course. How mad's that, right? And then, I don't know if you know what a co-accused is. What it means is, if you commit a crime with someone and go to court with them, and go to prison with them, they're classed as your co-accused. In the Alpha course, I had people who, when I first got out, said they'd never try anything about God. All my co-accused, all in offenders who were in the prison, who knew me, who grew up with me, all ended up on the Alpha course. And then one day, I went in the office, and they rang an officer up. He come to the door, he knocked on the door. The officer who I stabbed came into the office, and I couldn't stop apologising to him as much as I possibly can, to the point of where I said, I must have got on his nerves a bit trying to apologise, because he'd already said he'd forgive me, but it come to a point where he said, look, I really am sorry. I said, I wasn't in the frame of mind. He went, tell us about it. So we had a laugh and we had a coffee together. You know, who would have thought that the prison, how can this happen? The prison officer who you stabbed, the other one, you know, you ruined, he stopped working from that moment. You've sort of like, how can he, and he was going against his own family's wishes because they didn't want him to. How can he forgive me?
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
I'm not going to rabble on because I'll be here. I'll start preaching to you all, and then I'll start. So I'll stop now before I go on any further.
Well, I'm going to ask you another question, but I'll let Jonathan start. So this is to both of you. It's just an interesting one. Mark asks, does prison work? How would you change the system so that people like Shane in prison today can be helped?
Well, prison works in very limited ways, and on the whole, prison is a great failure. But how does it work? Well, let's go to the purposes of prison. There are some people who are so dangerous that they need to be locked up for the protection of the public, and that succeeds. After that, there are some people who I think need to be punished by the state for the magnitude of their crime. It may be a fraud, it may be a succession of burglaries, and the state, I think, has the right to inflict certain kinds of judicial punishment on bad wrongdoing. So to that extent, prison works. Our Victorian ancestors, and a very small minority of us today, think that the third purpose of prison is to rehabilitate, to change people, to set them on a new path. And there the failure is just dismal and desperate. And I won't go into huge detail, but the official statistics say that something like 6 out of every 10 prisoners reformed. That's a tremendous underestimate, probably. And so, in terms of changing people into better people, whether it's for spiritual reasons or practical reasons, on the whole, it fails. So, does prison work? In the all-important rehabilitation area, no.
Shane, anything you want to add?
You'll be shocked at my answer, though. My answer is, jail's getting so easy that it's becoming a fashion statement for the younger lads today. They want to go, they're not bothered about going to prison. They get the TVs, they get everything. You get your Argos catalogues, and it might sound crazy coming from me, but you get everything given to you that now young lads do not care whether they go to jail. They're not bothered. So I would say the tougher it is, the more people are going to think twice. So if you go into prison and you get everything and it's nice and you love it, then you're not going to think, when you get out of prison, you've experienced that actually it's not as hard as I thought it was. So you get out of prison and don't even care even more whether you go to prison for an even bigger sentence because it's easy. But I think if you make it not bad in the sense of, but it's tough, then when they get out of that prison, they're going to think twice about committing that crime again. And that's a totally different. And rehabilitation comes from, doesn't matter how many times you try and change a person, until he suddenly realizes and he wants to change himself. No one else is going to change him.
God.
Nobody. And that's what I learned. You cannot change a person. You can put him on 1,000,000 courses until he comes to that point he wants to change. Or in my case, until God does something big. But apart from that, when I was in my zone, you put me on 1,000,000 courses, done everything they could, meant nothing, did nothing to me. And it does nothing to the inmates, and the crime rate will just keep flying up and the violence will keep getting bigger because the inmates aren't afraid of prison anymore because they get a nice TV, nice Argos catalogue to order from, live really comfortable, kettles now, you know, you get the works now. And I don't mean this in a bad way, but it's just, the reality is, if you make it so easy for a person in prison, what do you think that's going to do when he gets back out? Do you think he's going to think, oh no, I can't go back in there? Or is he going to be like, do you know what? I didn't even realise jail was so easy. I used to fear jail. But now I've been in and I see how easy it is, I'm going to get out and I'm going to be even more ruthless than I was the first place. And that's what I see on the council estates where I come from, and the young lads who I'm with, and knowing who I know, that's what I see, and that's the mentality young teenagers have today.
Okay. Okay, Jonathan, in all your years as a chaplain now in prisons, what have been your highlights?
Well, I love being a prison chaplain, and I never thought I would ever be one, but I am. And I disagree only to the small extent of what Shane has just said, is that you never know when you are listening, and part of the biggest part of being a chaplain is to be a good listener. You never know when you sometimes hear a cry for helping to change. I'd love to, only I could get out of this. And of course, Shane is right, you have to have the personal willpower or the God power behind. I mean, who would ever thought that you would have changed if I've described your situation before the moment you did? So don't underestimate the power of God's call inside a prison, and it happens all the time. But a chaplain does many, many things, but helping to keep the peace, helping to keep men calm. I have a particular problem which will surprise you. I'm in a prison which has 1,500 men who are waiting for trial. They are on remand. And so they've actually not been convicted. How long do you think they have to wait to get in front of a court? Well, of course it varies, but the average is now 15 months in London. And there's some people going well over 2 years before they have their day in court. And this is a huge disgrace to the system. And at 40%, of course, usually either have their trials stopped or found not guilty, or the charges are withdrawn. So the system is badly, badly bunged up and failing. When I was a young law student, I used to write in my notebook a great maxim of the criminal justice system: justice delayed is justice denied. That's just a laughable statement now. Everybody's day in court is hugely delayed, and that's a big problem.
Thank you. Shane, what have been your greatest joys since coming out of prison?
Well, I can't be too honest, too truthful on that, but I'll say having my kids, my 5 beautiful children, even though on a daily basis they absolutely drive me crazy because they constantly fighting, especially the 3 boys. But my older one, he's all right now, but there's an 8-year-old and a 9-year-old or something, and they just, as soon as they come in from school, he's got that, he wants that, it's like, shut up, just go upstairs and play, or go and play. But yeah, my kids are the best thing ever. The second one is just things like throughout your walk, and my Christian walk, like when I fell into a trouble or a hardship or something like that, it's never stopped amazing me how God comes in right at the right time and just slowly starts changing everything to go perfectly right. And in that, you learn something in yourself, and you grow, and you spiritually grow, and it's just unbelievable. That kind of, for me anyway, just seeing God do stuff as time goes on. I used to say, oh, God, he can't surprise me anymore. But I stopped saying that, because every time I say it, something happens, I'm like, wow, God, you've done it again. So that's what my life's been like. It's just like God just shows you something, learns you, teaches you, and I just love that. I really do. I love it. And then preaching to everyone as well at the same time.
Wonderful. So it's often said, this is to both of you, it's often said that faith is easiest to maintain in the constrained environment of a prison. How has your faith evolved and sustained you since your release, particularly when facing judgments from the outside world?
Shall I go first? Oh. So when I was in prison, my faith getting hindered. No, I was crazy. I was running around the wing like a lunatic, like I told you. I was preaching to the prison guards. The prison guards thought I'd lost it. I was running in. But you know what started happening? The prison officers, the prison officers started coming to me and saying to me, "We can't believe what we're seeing. This is amazing, this." And one of the women, there was an incident where the officers would challenge you sometimes, and I don't know whether it was just a test to see if what was going on, but they did something what would have normally annoyed me and make me attack them. And all I remember doing is I just held my hands like that, and I just said, "Can I ask you a question?" And the officer went, "What?" I went, "Would you have done that to me about 6 months ago?" He went, "Oh, no, I wouldn't." I went, "Well, there's the change then, isn't it?" And I walked off. Not to say I didn't get annoyed inside, but I held it in. Then I went round the office, but one of the officers who were there practically jumped off the table to come to me, jumped off the chair fell and everything, ran to the door, shook my hand with proper and he went, "Look, the way you responded there," he said, "keep that up." He said, "I can't believe it." So he's me again. It was Jesus. Jesus changed me. You've got to believe. And then I'd start preaching, and I found myself preaching to prison officers even, and prison officers were coming and asking me questions. And one of the questions, he kept coming to me all the time when I went on the wing. And I remember, in a sense of as if he was waiting, and he'd come on the wing, and as soon as I come in, he'd be like, "But how come God's come to you? Why wouldn't he come to me?" That's why I don't believe in him, because he's come to you. And and remember, I'm only a new Christian, so I hadn't studied the Bible, I didn't know anything. And that's what I said to him after that. I just said, that's why he won't come to you. Yes. And he said, "Why?" I said, "Because you believe that you're so good that why would he come to somebody like me? And you've got to understand that you've probably done things in your life that are wrong, but just not as bad as me, and God knows them wrongs that you've done, and he knows your faults, but you don't think you've got them." And then I walked off, and then a couple of days after, he was back, and I was giving him the gospel and stuff, so I used to do that with him, and I just loved it.
So good.
And I become prison chaplaincy. That was a hard job, because I had to keep mopping all the, but I just loved it anyway, but I didn't like the mopping part of it in the thing.
Wonderful.
So I just changed my life in jail, and then when I got out of jail, I can't explain, it hasn't been hindered. What's hindered me is myself, and when a struggle comes and you have your own little inner battles with yourself, and when things happen, do you let go and forgive and do stuff, or do you just, this is what I'm learning, or can you just let things linger on you and get yourself mad and live in self-pity and start getting annoyed and let Satan play on your mindset? And no, I'm learning, and I've learned, and I keep learning, that the quicker you just let go of everything, the quicker God does everything, and it's just, to me, who hinders myself? Nothing's hindered.
Wonderful.
From the outside, I just don't care. I just like talking about God. I like preaching. I know God's real. No one will ever. I'll die for that. People might say it in just jest. I'm telling you, if someone put a gun to my head, it's the only way I can describe it in my way. You put a gun to my head and say to me, "I will pull this trigger if you just say Jesus isn't real," and I really mean this, they'd have to shoot me, because I couldn't see he wasn't.
Amen. That's great.
And that's the truth.
Beautiful.
It is the truth.
Wonderful. Jonathan. Very good.
I think in answer to the question, I would say that a journey of faith, whether it starts in prison or anywhere else, is not a quick fix. The parable of the sower just reminds us that seed can be thrown onto ground which may look temporarily so it's going to be very good and fertile, but actually, for various reasons, the seeds can spring up much too quickly, emotional reasons, or because in prison it's sometimes called, I think I've forgotten the phrase now, but the sort of instant conversion, and it's not actually very real or very deep. And I suspect there are quite a lot of people in this audience tonight who are nurturers of faith. You belong to churches, and I think that's a big, big challenge to be an encourager and a nurturer of faith, whether it's come from a prison or anywhere else, to keep people on the road, keep them faithful. Foxhole conversions was the phrase I was searching for. In prison, sometimes there's a great surge of enthusiasm. Things have gone really wrong for my life. It'll all be all right if I do an Alpha course or believe in God. It's not a quick fix. It's a long, slow haul. And those who encourage the slow growth through prayer, through worship, through teaching, through Bible reading, they are just as important as anybody else in the whole panorama of faith.
And that's why he's a vicar.
Brilliant answer, Jonathan.
Sorry.
So the most upvoted question was this one to you, Jonathan. Your interrelationships with other prisoners seem to have been something you warmed to fairly easily. Did your time as a war correspondent give you experience that helped you with this?
I think war correspondent life and prison life are totally different. In war correspondent life, great deal of excitement, great deal of drinking, great deal of drama. Prison is, I think, above all, very boring most of the time. Perhaps not when you were around, but, but most of the time, it's crushingly, mind-numbingly boring. And I think the serious work of prison chaplaincy is to make the Christian faith sound, which it is, so exciting, so life-changing, such a much better alternative that is what sticks and people stick with. So I don't think you can really compare the two, except in humorous ways. Much more whiskey in war correspondent life.
Shane, John asks, do you think anyone could have prevented you from that path and going to prison?
Everyone tried. My mum tried everything. It was a mixture of family split up, my mum and dad, having an uncle who committed crimes and he become like a bit of a father figure to me, and then just all the local wrong people becoming my friends. It was like a mixture of everything all together, all at once, just no one to blame, just I went down that wrong route and I liked it. And as time went on, I kept doing it and kept getting more deeper into it. Comes to a point though where you get so deep into it that there's no turning back. You feel like there's no turning back. And then I just remember I used to generally believe that when I got out of prison I wasn't going to go back. But what did I do? I went back out, couldn't get a job because criminal record. Had plans to, but couldn't. Your friends are there. Your own uncle's there who you looked up and who brought you up in a sense, who brought you down a criminal life. Feeling like you blamed yourself that your mum and dad splitting up. And then I don't think anything could have, because people actually tried. My mum used to even pay me £50 a week if I'd keep out of trouble. So I'd keep out of trouble for the 1 week, take the 50 quid and then have another trouble where the other week I'd get into trouble. She tried to ground me, then I'd sneak out. Then after trying to ground me, she'd take all my clothes off me so I couldn't sneak out. So I went in my dad's bedroom and folded all his clothes up and put them on and tied the things around me so I could get out and run out with that. There's nothing, they tried everything, this is the thing. My parents tried everything. Teachers around me tried everything. Just nothing, I don't know. Could someone have come in at the time? I don't know, but I didn't listen. I got wrong, I got my good items, I got grounded, I got everything. And whatever she did, all I wanted to do was be out stealing with my friends for some reason. And I couldn't even put a finger on why. It was just fun. That's what all my friends did, so I thought it was fun, and I wanted to be out with my friends. And I would even come to a point where once my friend drove up on a motorbike and I was grounded, and he was on the motorbike, and my dad was there, and I knew I'd get a good hiding off him if I did it, and I just ran past him, jumped on the back of the bike, and he chased after me, nearly got me. And so the point is, that's how bad I was. They tried everything. I don't think anything would have.
Okay. Well, listen, Jonathan's got to get a train back into London. Shane, you're either staying at our house, or Isaac, you're driving back for 6 hours to Middlesbrough. I don't know what you're going to choose. Point being that we're going to make it a last open question. Sorry if it didn't get to all your questions. A number of ones came in. But Jonathan, is there anything that wasn't drawn out that you're like, oh, I wish I'd had the chance to share this? Same question to you. What would be your parting shot to us?
I'm a bit worried because Shane was a hard man and a hard case. And we've got too pessimistic a presentation tonight. And because prison, as you tell the stories, is full of dramas, and they're on the whole negative dramas. But there are masses of people who actually do keep people out of prison. Good families, good women who marry bad men, good probation officers, good mentors, good churches. There are a lot of them who actually succeed. And although there are reasons for gloom, there are also reasons for saying, well, thank God for those people who do good work and actually do prevent crime, prevent people from going back to crime, and make a big, big difference on the plus side of human lives. I see that, and I'm very proud of the prison chaplaincy world, but I'm sure there are people in this audience in churches who should say to themselves, actually, there's great work to be done in this field, and I'd love to do it, and it's a good work, and it bears forth good fruit.
Amen. Great answer. Yeah. Thank you, Jonathan, because we want to end on we've got a hope-filled message, haven't we? And there's lots of great people doing sacrificial work in the system. We cheer them on every step of the way. Shane, last word from you.
If there's anyone in the audience, if you don't know God, or if you're not a Christian, I promise you, I'm not here blagging anybody. I promise you God's real, and try and go down that route. And if you do, I hope and pray that he does or comes into your life, because once he does, I promise you, you won't even be bothered what anyone thinks or says. It'll change your life. And for the Christians who are already Christian, the similar message to him is keep going on with our heart to save everybody. Life can get a bit difficult at times as well, and get busy, and things can get in the way. But don't lose that focus God give you. He give you it for a reason. And if you can just save one person, because sometimes I think we focus on the number game. Oh, we want to save the world, but that's not our job to do. That's God's job to do. His job is he might have just saved you to save the one person, who might save another 2, who might save another 5, and 10 years down the line save another 20. That's his plan. So stick to your goal of what you feel God told you to do, and just have the faith, stick with it, and allow God to help you save whoever he chooses to save. And it might just be one person in your life, but be happy with that one person. The chaplaincy who saved me, how many people through me has God touched? Not saying that in a thingy way, but has God touched through just little idiot me?
Big idiot. Yeah.
And I'm getting a bit bigger now. What I learned in I used to get excited when I'd feel God want me to do stuff. And I'd be dead excited, and when I didn't see results or anything like this. But I can just finish off with this one little thing where God showed me something. A massive thing, this. I went down south and I was doing a testimony, and I got asked by the teachers to go and speak to this lad he's unruly, he's going off the rails a bit, and he was in college or something like that. So I went in, I said, and I was just real with him, and I told him, I talked to him, and then I went home. And on that day, for some reason, I don't know why, you know, I've never been one of them, you know, when you go to somewhere, you give your testimony and you pray for people, and, you know, all these people are all saved, getting saved and all this. Never see stuff like that. So I got discouraged, and I was going home, and I was driving home thinking, what's the point of me doing this? I never see people change, I never see this, I never see that. And I just got on with my life, and then obviously God got me over me feeling sorry for myself. But I moved on and was doing stuff for years and doing other stuff. And then one day, I got about 5, 6, 7 years down the line, I get this massive message saying, you don't know who I am, but I'm the mother of the son who you spoke to. I'm the mother of the son who you spoke to. When he came in from the college that day, something happened, because he came in, he kissed me on my cheek. He said, Mum, I'm never going to give you any trouble again. And she said, he's now just passed all his degrees and his law degrees, and he's going to become a barrister.
Wow.
I can't even tell you that there, just that thing, that one thing, I will die a happy man. But the point of that, telling you that is, you don't always see what you're doing. You don't see that impact. And just because you don't see it, just like me, don't let it get you down. Don't let it drag you down. That's just what the devil wants. Just keep going and pushing forward, and in the end, you'll change people's lives. Thank you.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Ah, great.